Pixar's brand new sequel era has returned as Inside Out 2 has came out, and I've decided to share these initial thoughts with you. Thoughts that are on the more positive side, I'm thankful to say, and ones that will be a benchmark to gauge the future of how these films impact us. Where, as you've seen by the title, this film really indeed is pretty good. Dare I say, a perfect sequel that continues the great story of what Inside Out brought initially. Looking back on our many videos about the worrying sequel trends and what that would mean, I'm happy to say that this film satisfied those positive expectations rather than the negatives, enough to really affirm that something like this was needed to put the studio back on track after this recent slump we've all discussed. Sure, we will still talk about the many problems with the other sequels and whatnot that comes for the future of Disney, but at least for now, with what was designed into the story of Inside Out 2, this really is a great example of where it can work. Like, I really do think, in my own opinion, who has been critical about a lot of Pixar sequels or sadly conflicted over my negative emotions about Disney these days, that this is just one of the best sequels that Pixar or Disney has ever produced beyond Toy Story. It obviously isn't like the greatest ones in the world compared to other few because of some of the pacing problems of the film that I find, but it really is just a great continuation of the world of Inside Out. This is a film that really captures the emotions of change in this world, the sense of self that they use as the core of the movie, which is basically the perception of collection of characteristics that define what kind of person you are, if you think you are great or just not good enough. Some people might think that the choice of emotions they put in the film might have not been the best, but it really is perfect in the sense of defining what our typical changes are like at this stage in life. The point of highlighting puberty as she enters this phase just before high school. Like, you're really getting the picture of the film maturing with itself, with its characters and its audience, while everyone can still enjoy it regardless of age, which is the heart of where Pixar truly is. Adults and childs coming together to relate to experience of things both past and present, while possibly leading us to the future. The definition of a good family film. And having anxiety lead that along the way alongside joy as the other half was just a great way to show us these concepts. The passions of what we can become as humans based upon simple emotions that guide us inside our heads. You just think about what they did in the first place with that concept and you fall in love with that over again. How they really do build it off in such a familiar yet somewhat unique way that is filled with fun references and really emotional moments that do make those emotions stand out way more than they ever could do. It's the kind of thing that they were looking for when it comes to the past articles talking and mentioning about that Pixar quality that doesn't leave you out while still coming to terms and appreciate the past few films that have been released. The universal concepts of it all. Sure, they are niched down, but you have to make yourself realize that that's always been the case for this entire studio, and Inside Out 2 is no different, with focusing on a preteen experience of with a girl who's gone through many changes in her life, which is admirable for them keeping and focusing on that part of the story, even if some might have expected to focus on other sides like love or whatnot, keeping it within that same line and the emotional beats of what Inside Out taught us in the first place. It's specific yet universal in its feeling because of how you're able to dig deep into someone or something's mind, absolutely loving the choices of animation they make both inside and out, no pun intended, because you truly do notice how far they've come in animation while sticking with a similar style and then branching out with those separate details in one of the other short references they make. Also giving hats off to the other supporting cast of the film for the audio for doing a great job despite the original cast members that were replaced, where I think one of them was probably a good choice in my mind anyway. Inside Out 2, despite its title, actually does stand on its own as a movie as well, one that you can watch without knowing the past film that was a part of it. You do of course have to recap yourself with moments from the first and actions expressed by its characters that they obviously put in, but it's also not really necessary to add or learn about, an element that many sequels should strive for, just like how others like Puss in Boots surpassed its own since it really mixed its ideas and elements together, creating a good story along the way. The point being of how this is similar yet different in the ways from both films, which is probably both a good and bad thing depending on how you view it. Since you know this still deals with the conflict of emotions clashing over each other and who should be in charge, which you know from the first, but one that also grows when you're defining your sense of self, or maybe redefining in this movie's definition. Like, when you go back and forth in both cases of her mind and in the outside world itself, you find a compelling and thrilling adventure to reclaim that happiness that made her the character she is, the relationships that were formed, the memories that are made, and the future that has yet to be discovered. Change this doesn't come from within, it's also expressed outworld in a world that has so many different ideas, so many influences that can fill you with other feelings like envy or regret that you didn't think of sooner, that cause an overload of mixtures that want you to bury the past and rewrite a new present. And for those who've just watched the film, you do understand what I truly mean by this, how we allow ourselves to control the actions of others and realize that only we can decide that for ourselves. themselves. Again, still having that same message in one emotion that thinks this is the best that will make her succeed, but realizing that there is something more to that side. They have strengths, but they all also have weaknesses. They have two sides that are balanced and how they can be both a benefit and a hindrance, and how both can really work together to become one of the same. They are tangible if you really think about them fulfilling one role or the other, and it really does make this film elevate itself on that level. So you really just have to believe me when I say there's nothing about this film that I really hate or hold any anger towards. Not that Pixar has made me feel that way at all in their past, since I've enjoyed most of their films to some degree, unless we talk about how painfully boring and disrespectful other films like Lightyear was to the Pixar quality compared to the films that came before or after it, and how I'm just mentioning this because I actually can't find a really lot to complain about this movie, not having that same disappointing feeling like other films like Incredibles 2 gave me, and more of the warmth of say something similar in the vein of Toy Story 3. And I really like the fact they include things like nostalgia in the film, a fun reference to other things to how such films come to be like this that is again both good and a bad thing, and learning about the old life or the new life. Just so much relatable things that made me quite emotional myself, even if it comes from a girl that plays hockey, which I'm not that type of person at all. But understanding its core themes and feelings that are inside all of us as human beings. Where the financial future that lies in store for this film is something I really don't know, but how I really do know that story-wise, this was truly a great comeback that gives me hope for a better Pixar future. That we find ourselves able to make room for the newer things in life and newer emotions as one begins to develop or to relate to such development the further they go. We're thinking about that concept, you do realize as long as they are able to continue the path that this film captured off its main story, they can make more films and sequels centered around the characters growing up. Not that I really want to encourage them to do so, even if it's going to be inevitable at this point because of Disney, but how they have a good blueprint and path forward to make films or make this into a trilogy that goes about the stages of life inside one's emotions, both in terms of past, present, and future, and shaping of oneself to who they were always meant to be, defining what the human's purpose in the world truly is, as Pixar has done so many times in the past. This was something that was really needed to showcase that we can be better than who we are now, both in terms of ourselves as humans and of course the studio, and how there's always room for improvement, and we can discover that in the good and bad of us. The moments where even I myself get secondhand embarrassment both inside quarters and outside the real world for Riley as she learns to navigate these seasons of change, which truly really is a good thing that benefits the story so that all may love it. The choices that makes it great because that is what life is really like. Of course, the last thing I really want to say before I leave you with this is that I will hold myself until I think this would be a better or just a simple good successor to the first. Not really matching the heights, but still good regardless, and how nonetheless this is still a good time. Something that was really just needed and thankful to show us the emotional relatability that does exist for them and all of life around us, and to prove that Pixar's greatest days are still yet ahead of them. So I'm all done. Goodbye.